Hey, what's happening, guys? What's going on YouTube? You guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels. Saturday morning, got my morning coffee here. I got a little bit of time to kill, and I figured we would knock out a video. The title of today's video is going to be The Economy is Going to Collapse After the Midterms. We have the midterms coming up on November 8th. That's just a little over 2 weeks away. And it's my belief, my theory, my thesis that the economy is going to collapse after midterms, and kind of why do I think that, or why do I feel that way? Well, two things. I feel like one, we're due, right? Like going into the beer cough and the lockdowns, we were already due for a correction, a pullback, possibly a recession, and that's just without the whole beer cough situation even happening. Stack on top of that the beer cough, we printed more money in 2 years than we've ever printed in the history of our monetary system. We have all types of supply chain disruptions and labor shortages, in large part due to the beer cough situation and lockdowns. And in a lot of ways, it's disrupted the normal flow of things. And what I mean by that, real estate's crazy because it kind of disrupted where and how people work, where and how people want, or, where people live, where people choose to live. Housing prices have gone up like crazy. You also have in a lot of downtown areas and business districts and city centers, you have a lot of businesses that went under during the beer cough situation and have never come back because people are no longer working in offices. And, I think during the beer cough situation, something like 88% of restaurants in San Francisco had closed down. And most of those businesses have not returned to the office. So there's nobody frequenting those coffee shops. There's nobody going to the panini shop or the wrap shop to get lunch. There's nobody catering lunches out. There's nobody going for happy hours after work. If you look at my city of Chicago, the Loop is mainly a business district. Over the past 5-10 years, there has been more residential property in that area. But still, if you go after work hours or on weekends, it's like a ghost town. And really, that whole area has never returned to what it used to be since the beer cough situation. It's kind of still, for the most part, always a ghost town down there. But you have all these business districts and areas with, we have all this commercial real estate that's not being utilized, and we have all these businesses, whether they be print centers, sandwich shops, coffee shops, bars, that no longer have anybody going to them because the only people that ever really frequented them were people in offices, and most people haven't returned to offices. So I'm getting a little bit off track here. This is actually the second or third time that I've tried to make this video, but my theory is that one, we were due for a correction. Two, it's going to be made worse by everything that's happened in the last 2 years, from money printing to changes in where we live and how we work and not being in offices. But the big things, I think, are number one, that the economy is being artificially propped up right now until after midterms. And number two, things are a lot worse right now than most people perceive them to be. And the government, the media, social media, tech companies, are all trying to hide the image of how bad things really are. So that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. I'm not just going to say this. I'm going to kind of give you guys some background and some information as to why I believe this to be true. And what does this mean? Does this mean that, the midterms are on November 8th and the next day everything's going to collapse? Well, no. I think things will take some time to unravel, and it'll take time for things to kind of come apart. But I do think that will be the beginning of things coming apart. Now, we could see this happen right away. It could take a couple weeks. It could take a couple months. I'm fairly certain it'll happen before the end of the year. And if not by the end of the year, very, very early in 2023, we're going to see things start to unravel. We're already seeing layoffs, happening. First it was tech, then it was like mortgage industry and real estate. But you're starting to see Intel is laying off, I forget if it was 20,000 employees or 20% of their employees, but Intel's doing a big layoff. Facebook has halted hiring. They're closing down some offices. Ford's laying off a bunch of people. GM is thinking about laying off people. They tried to tell everybody they had to come back into the office. I think that's a way to kind of get people to quit. But we're starting to see layoffs happen outside of the tech, mortgage, and real estate industries. Now, if you watch a movie like I Am Legend, or what's a TV show with the zombies? If you watch those TV shows, even when society collapses and everybody disappears, it's not like overnight animals overtake cities, and the highways and asphalt and concrete are overtaken by plants. This stuff takes a while to happen. In the same way, the economy is not going to unravel overnight, but the midterms will be the beginning of this happening. So let's first make the case for why the economy is being artificially propped up. Well, one thing that we could look at is the Fed, right? In order to combat inflation, you need to raise interest rates to what inflation is at. The government traditionally tells us that inflation is at 2 or 3%. When they tell us that, in reality, it's more than likely at 4 to 6%, so 2 to 3 times what the government admits. Right now, the government is telling us inflation is at about 9%. I'm sure if you guys buy groceries, you buy clothes, you've tried to get a service technician to come out to your house, you had to buy a car, anything you buy is probably going to cost you 25 to 40% more than it would have a year or two ago. So, I think most of us realize that inflation is much higher than the government is letting on. And if we go off the idea that inflation is probably 2 to 3 times what the government admits, if the government's saying inflation is at 9%, 9, 18, 27, it's probably closer to 27%, and it may even be higher than that. So in order to combat inflation, in theory, we would have to raise inflation to at least 9%, which is what the government admits it is. In reality, it's probably closer to 20%, if not higher. Now, back in the 80s, I don't remember this. I wasn't necessarily around in investing. But from my understanding, the government or the Fed tried to play around with inflation. We'll raise rates and we'll bring them back. We'll raise rates and we'll bring them back. Had really no effect at stopping inflation until Paul Volcker came in and raised rates to 20%. The economy got really bad for a period of time, but that's what actually put an end to the inflation of the time. The Fed has been, they say they're serious about fighting inflation, but for 2 years they told us inflation wasn't going to happen. Then they said it was transitory. They've just finally started admitting that inflation is here. So the idea that they're seriously trying to tackle inflation doesn't seem like the truth or like a reality. Another thing, the Fed keeps doing these 0.75% hikes, and that's not enough to truly combat inflation. I have a feeling the Fed doesn't want to be viewed as affecting the midterm elections, so they're probably going to hold off on any big rate hikes until after. And once that happens, the stock market will tank, housing will tank even more, and the downturn or the recession will really begin. So I have a feeling the Fed is waiting until after midterms to not be accused of affecting elections. Another thing you have to look at gas prices. So for quite a while now, Biden has been releasing oil from these strategic oil reserves. The strategic oil reserves are not meant to lower gas prices 3 cents to make you look better for the next election or to make your party look better for the next election. The strategic oil reserves are here to, if there's a natural disaster, an emergency, we go to war, something catastrophic happens, that's what the strategic oil reserves are for. However, Biden has been not only selling oil in our strategic oil reserves to other countries, but he's been releasing it to try to bring down gas prices. Now, it really has next to no effect on gas prices. Gas prices might come down 3 cents a nickel, 6 cents, 7 cents for a couple days, but then they go back up. And that's why he's had to continue releasing strategic oil reserves over and over and over again. So he's trying to artificially pump up the price of gas, which is going to make people not as upset at the incumbent party or the party in power. And also because everything that we buy has to be transported, and really everything uses energy, it's also going to, in turn, kind of help prop up the economy. Biden was recently caught asking Saudi Arabia and OPEC not to cut production for 30 days. Now, why would Biden not want them to cut production for 30 days? Because that will cause gas prices to go up. But what's the significance of 30 days? Well, at that time, and this is just within the past couple weeks, but at that time, midterms were in 25 days. So if they hold off on cutting oil production, gas prices will remain at least a little bit lower going into the midterms. If they do it right away, gas prices go up. And when gas prices are high, typically the party in power does not do well during an election. Now, keep in mind, Donald Trump was impeached the first time for doing essentially the same thing, even though Zelensky, who was the person he was supposedly extorting or blackmailing, said, no, that didn't happen. I'm not being extorted. I'm not being blackmailed. Biden basically said, I'm going to halt financial aid and military aid if you cut production before the midterms or within 30 days. This is actually an impeachable offense. It also has a very, very bad look to it. But Saudi Arabia and OPEC came out and said, yes, Biden did that. So that's kind of evidence right there that Biden is kind of trying to prop up the economy until after midterm elections. Now, kind of the next case we have to make here is that the media, social media companies, tech, everybody is kind of collaborating to not let on how bad things really are. And here's something that's interesting, right? Even back in 2015, 2016, 2017, we would see all these articles in the media about how the average American isn't saving enough for retirement or has no retirement savings. Millennials are struggling. The average American doesn't have $300 if they were hit with some type of emergency, whether that be a car repair, a root canal, whatever. So people have been check to check and not doing well financially long before the beer cough, long before lockdowns. And the media was really kind of hammering on how bad people were doing economically. Well, fast forward to today, a couple years later, inflation is higher than ever. Wages have not kept up with inflation. So if people were struggling before prices went up 20%, 30%, 40%, I don't know how people are keeping a roof over their heads or putting food in their bellies or paying for anything right now. We have seen a lot of people taking on second and third jobs. But why is it that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the media was really harping on how bad everybody was doing financially. And today, during a time when inflation is out of control, people are paying 30 to 40% more for groceries. You can afford about half the house that you could have 2 years ago. Why is the media kind of making things look rosy and not making things look as bad as they probably are? If things were bad 3 years ago or 5 years ago, things are hellacious today. So why would why would the media kind of not want to let on to how bad things really are? Well, if you look at the past 2 years of the Mexican beer cough and lockdowns, the idea that the media would manipulate us or push certain narratives for politicians, I mean, that's evident, right? I probably don't need to make a case for that. We've learned that, forget if it was a politician or a health official in New York, lied about hospital admissions for kids because she wanted more kids to take the thing in their arm. She wanted more parents to get their kids to get the thing in their arm. So politicians and the media are not beyond lying to push an agenda. And so kind of my argument is that the same thing is happening with the economy right now. It was just a couple months ago that the pretty much like the press force, all the reporters from all the major news organizations had a meeting at the Biden White House to meet about and discuss how they could show Biden in a better light. How crazy is that, right? Like, it's the media's job to question the government. It's the media's job to question the power. It's the media's job to call out the president, to call out the government. I'm not saying that they have to have like a combative relationship, right? They can be cordial to one another. But the media, is supposed to be the watchdogs. And they're meeting with the Biden White House to see how can we show him in a more positive light. That's not what their job is to do. Now, even going into the beer cough, people's trust in media was at all-time lows. After seeing everything that's gone on for the past 2 years, it's even worse. And anybody with a brain at this point doesn't trust the media, nor should they. But I think now it's like upwards of 80% don't believe or don't trust the media. So, it's my belief that the media is kind of propping up this idea that the economy isn't as bad as it really is. And what winds up happening is people's, perception in a lot of cases is more important than reality. And people's perception can actually kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And what I mean by that is when the Fed or Jamie Dimon or the big banks kind of release their guidance or their predictions about what's to come for the economy, they kind of manipulate stats. They try to show things in as positive of a light as possible. They can't outright lie to you because then they'll kind of lose your trust. But they try to make things sound as rosy as possible. And that's because they know perception is important. And if you tell people the economy is going to get bad, that's actually going to change people's behavior. So people are going to maybe they start shopping at Trader Joe's instead of Whole Foods. Maybe they decide to put off buying that new house. Maybe they decide to put off buying that new car. Maybe they decide not to take that vacation they were thinking about maybe taking. And when people alter their behavior, there's less money flowing into the economy. There's less people supporting businesses. And because of that, it kind of winds up turning into a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that in and of itself drives us into a recession. Another thing, even if you just look at the inflation going on right now, and this is kind of independent of the other points, but let's say that on an average month you have, just for easy numbers, we'll say you have $100 of disposable income. And maybe you use those $100 to buy widgets, maybe you use it to go out to dinner. Either way, let's say a meal out costs $20, or let's say buying these widgets costs $20. Before inflation, these widgets cost $20, or your meal out cost $20. So you could go out to 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. That's 5. You could support 5 different restaurants. You could buy widgets from 5 different companies. But after inflation kicks in and those $20 widgets now cost $50, your $100 of disposable income is only good for either 2 meals out or 2 widgets, or 1 meal out and 1 widget. But before, with your disposable income, you could support 5 different businesses or 5 different restaurants. After inflation, you can only support 2. So there's less money going around. There's less people supporting these businesses. So here's another thing going on, right? Like for the past 2 years, we heard about the great resignation. We heard about quiet quitting, and everybody's trying to figure out, why doesn't anybody want to work anymore, right? You hear it all the time. Nobody wants to work anymore. Nobody wants to work anymore. We always hear about how there's way more jobs than there are people, but most of these jobs are low paying retail, hospitality, restaurant, service sector jobs. And most people don't want to do those jobs, right? Not only do they not pay enough, but a lot of people don't want to work in those industries. During the beer cough situation, we saw a number of studies that came out that said 78% of people who worked in restaurants or hospitality don't want to go back to it. I think part of the reason is they think, if anything like this ever happens again, my industry will be the first one to shut down, and I want something a little bit more secure and more stable. But also that whole situation made us reevaluate our lives. And a lot of people said, I don't really want to be working nights and weekends. I don't really want to be abused by customers. I don't want to work these crazy hours. Maybe if somebody who was working in a restaurant decides to get a job in a call center, it may not even pay that much more, but it's better hours. Now they're Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, instead of scattered hours and nights and weekends and holidays. So a lot of these jobs out there, people don't want to work. Another thing that's happening, I think this is one of the biggest reasons, quote unquote, people don't want to work. The reason that you're paid for work is because it's not fun, right? You need to be incentivized to do it. And when you're paid, what do you do with that money? What do you want to have? Well, if I'm working a job, I want to be able to take a vacation or 2 per year. I want to be able to have a reliable car to get me to and from work, but also around to transport my family. I want to be able to buy a home. I want to be able to buy a home so that me and my wife or girlfriend can live there, so that I can have kids and raise kids there. If I got dogs, I want to be able to, have some dogs in the backyard. When you look at how unaffordable everything has gotten, a lot of people feel like they've missed out on their chance to own a home. And what I'm noticing from a lot of young people online, on social media, specifically on if you look on Reddit, there's subreddits called like r/lost generation, r/anti-work. These are people who've given up on their careers, given up on life, given up on the idea that they can have a happy life. If you look on a website like 4chan, a lot of people are what they call NEET, N-E-E-T. It basically means you don't want to be a part of society. You don't want to work. You just want to either spend as little as possible that you don't have to work, or you want to kind of make money in crypto and with little side hustles so that you don't have to participate in, quote unquote, the wagey economy. You don't have to deal with, quote unquote, HR roasties and all this type of stuff. Now, NEET actually is a real term. It actually means something. It's an acronym for, or it stands for, not employed or in education or training, right? Like not an employed E. The next E is education, and the last T is training. So if you're a NEET, you're not in education or training. There's been some recent studies and surveys that have come out that have found like 3 in 7 people between the ages of 18 and 50, which is, prime working age adults, or at the very least people who should be in college. They're not in education or training. So what are these people doing? Are they sitting home playing video games? They're playing around on Reddit. They're playing around on social media. Maybe they're doing the van life thing. But people are kind of opting out of society because it's like, the benefit to working is I can have a comfortable life. I can buy myself some nice things. I can do a little bit of traveling. I can buy a house. I can have a backyard where I have a little garden. I grow some weed. I play back there with my dogs. But with the rise in home prices, as well as everything around us, even if you work super hard, you're not going to have a nice, comfortable life. At least for a significant percentage of the population, no matter how hard they work, they're not going to be able to buy a home. They're not going to be able to take vacations. They're not going to be able to have a nice car. They're not going to be able to have a comfortable life. So what's the point of working at all, right? Like I might as well either drop out of society or just kind of get on welfare and food stamps and link and get, public assisted housing and, hope that maybe one day UBI, universal basic income, can happen and I can just sit home and play video games and be a neat, because no matter how hard I work, I'm not going to get a girlfriend. I'm not going to get a girlfriend. I'm not going to get a wife. I'm not going to have a home. So what's the point of working hard? And I don't see that whole situation changing anytime in the near future either. So what are things going to look like post this economic collapse? Honestly, I don't really know. Nothing in the world makes sense anymore. Stocks and crypto and real estate hit all-time highs during the beer cough lockdowns, during a time when nothing was being produced, nobody was working, nobody was traveling. That doesn't make any logical sense. Most of the gains in the stock market were coming from FANG companies, big tech companies, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those companies are starting to lay people off. Those companies are now also at kind of a turning point where they're actually going to have to start producing a profit. For a long time, a lot of VC money was pouring in. They could piss money away. They could have inefficient employees, and it didn't matter because they just were getting so much more money. Well, we're at a point where not only is inflation bad, not only is the economy getting bad, but we're kind of at a point. These companies have been around since 2006, if not earlier. They're going to have to start turning a profit, and they're going to have to be more efficient. And we also I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but we also have the quote unquote millennial lifestyle inflation coming to an end. So, when Uber Eats and Grubhub and Instacart and all these companies came out years ago, because of all the VC money, they were able to offer their services well below what they should have been priced at. So having your own personal driver, i.e. Uber and Lyft, that's a luxury service, right? That's something that in the past only like a CEO would have. Having somebody do your grocery shopping for you or deliver food to you because you're too lazy to go through the drive-thru at KFC. In the past, that was something that would be a luxury and that only very wealthy people would be able to afford. But because of all the VC money coming into tech companies, and because these tech companies wanted to get people hooked on their product or service, that's why you could get an Uber ride for $2 when in reality it should have been $20. That's why you could get your food delivered for a couple bucks when in reality it should raise the price of your food substantially. And these tech companies no longer have money flowing in. They have to become profitable. And so they're having to raise their prices, which means less people are using their services, which means these companies are going to do worse. If people are getting less food delivered, obviously that's going to affect the restaurants. That's going to affect the drivers. We live in such a global and such a connected economy that all of these things are going to have repercussions. If people aren't ordering food, the Grubhub drivers aren't making money. So how are the Grubhub drivers going to pay their rent? Whatever shopping that Grubhub drivers do, they're not going to have that money to spend to spread around to these various businesses. And everything, it's kind of like the food chain, right? Like when one part of it collapses, all of it collapses. And there's so many different areas of the economy that are about to collapse and are going to further drag down other sectors of the economy. I think here in the States, we have this idea that things have always been okay, so they will always be okay. When you see unrest in, what was that, like Indonesia or something like that, where the people stormed the presidential castle, when you see unrest in other areas of the country, you tend to think to yourself, oh, well, that could never happen, where I live. I live in the United States of America. We're a first world country and people are civilized and safe. But if you look at some of the BLM riots and things like that happened over the past couple years, I never thought I would see something like that. And we saw that we're slowly kind of, the country is becoming more degenerate. The country is becoming more divided. The country is becoming crazier. I'm not saying that we're going to be, living in some post-apocalyptic world, but I do think it's kind of naive to think, oh, well, things have always been good here, so things will always be good here. We're more divided than ever. We spent more money than ever, and the rest of the world is kind of waking up to the fact that this monopoly game we're playing with everybody's money. Hey, everybody, give us all your gold. Everybody be reliant on our currency, and we'll just print currency out of thin air and manipulate world economies. And we'll just have a printing press that never stops printing money. The rest of the world is kind of waking up to this, and the dollar status as the reserve currency is probably not going to be a thing that much longer. Now, I guess we'll kind of wrap this up on a sunnier note. Like, what can you do to prepare? What can you do to protect yourself? One thing that always kind of happens is people wait until the last minute to react to a situation, right? Nobody wants to be prepared for things. So the time to start preparing, the time to start creating multiple income streams, the time to start making some money and investing that money so that money can work for you. The time to start stacking money so that when a downturn happens, you're prepared to capitalize off of it. That time has kind of passed. Now, I'm not telling you you shouldn't start making changes today. Start living more frugally. Stop eating out as much. Start saving money. Maybe get a second job. Create a business. It's the best day to plant a tree was yesterday, and the best day after yesterday is today. So I'm not discouraging you guys from starting doing these things. But kind of take this as a lesson learned, and in the future realize you should always be hustling. You should always be living within your means. You should always live frugally. You should always spend less than you earn, so that when things like this happen, you are prepared. A lot of people, they lose their job and then they're freaking out trying to start a business or trying to find a way to make some money. Whereas the better way to go about things would be to start that business, create that business on the side, start that side hustle, create those revenue streams before you need them, so that if you are laid off from your job or something bad happens or your company goes under, you have something that's already bringing in some money. You have something that's already somewhat established that you can leap over to and kind of throw all your efforts into. Trying to think where else to go from here. I guess the best advice I can give is start living frugally. Sit down today, go through your credit card statements, go through your bank account, and see what money is going out. And me personally, I'm super cheap. I'm also very frugal. So most people would probably think I wouldn't have a lot of areas to cut. It's kind of funny. I've been telling my girlfriend for a while, we got to start cutting back. Things are about to start getting bad. We got to be prepared. And she kind of jokingly says, she's like, we don't spend money on shit. We're super frugal. Like, where can we really cut back? But a while back, I went through my credit card statements, bank account, PayPal account, and I was able to cut out about $1,500 of yearly expenditures just by going through there. I kind of totally forgot that I had a Hulu service I'm paying $7 a month for. We haven't logged into Hulu in 2 years. I might as well cancel that. There's a couple, kind of like e-commerce SaaS softwares. I subscribed to Jungle Scout and maybe some other softwares, TubeBuddy and a couple other things that are $20 a month, $30 a month, $50 a month that I don't really use anymore. I don't really need anymore. I noticed that for my my home internet, I was paying like $84 a month, and I have no cable, I have no phone, all I have is internet. That's pretty fucking high. What can I do to try to lower that? So I called Comcast or AT&T or whoever I have, and by hopping onto a contract, I was able to get that down to like $34 a month. Now, at the end of a year, it wound up going back up. I think I'm back up to $84, but I can probably contact them, negotiate, and get that down to $30 or $40 again. There's a lot of great apps and things like that. I've been curious. I think Rocket Financial or whatever has one. There's a lot of services now where, you got to pay the service, or maybe they take a cut of whatever they save you. But basically, they look over all your, it's like an SAS service. They look over all your bills, your credit card statements, your bank account, and then they find services or subscriptions that you're not using. And they wind up, with like one click, you can cancel those services. So that might be something to subscribe to for a month or two, just to figure out where you can, what services you can cut. And apparently with one click, they will cancel these services. So you're not sitting on hold or navigating all these websites and sending all these emails, trying to get subscription services canceled. So, start cutting back, start living more frugally, start living within your means. Maybe that means getting a roommate. Maybe that means moving into a smaller place. Stop eating out as much, start doing grocery shopping, learn to cook, buy yourself a crock pot, buy yourself a rice cooker. I was never one who ate out or got takeout a lot, but I've pretty much completely written off eating out and takeout over the past year or two. The level of, the cost has gone up, the level of service has gone down. Everybody wants fucking tips, even if you don't have a server or a waiter or nobody's actually taking care of you. So I've just kind of written it off. I've always been a decent cook, but I've gotten better at cooking. And, I would much rather have friends over and cook for my friends and family than go out to a restaurant. I get a better quality meal. It costs less. And the service is great because I am the server, I'm the cook, I'm the waiter, and I feel like I do a better job than most restaurants anyway. And that saves a lot of money. Start a side hustle. If you've been thinking about starting a side hustle, offering a service, trying to find some way to make money online, sit down this afternoon and get that started. Make one step each. A lot of times these things can be overwhelming. Take one step each day to furthering one of these things. So if you want to sell t-shirts online, hop on, you don't have to make 100 t-shirts today, but hop online, sit down and sign up for Amazon merch or sign up for Redbubble. Tomorrow, even if it's one small step, sign up for Canva, sign up for Adobe, sign up for some software that'll let you make t-shirts. The next day, sit down and get some inspiration. The next day, tell yourself, I want to crank out 3 t-shirts today. Maybe you want to start an e-commerce business. Maybe you want to start cleaning out people's garages, painting people's houses. Whatever it is, get that started and take a small step each day to kind of further that. And when you start making this money, I think right now cash is king. So I would start stockpiling cash. And then when this downturn happens, whether it's crypto or real estate investing, you want to buy a home, you want to put some money into index funds or the stock market, start stacking money and be prepared. So when this pullback does happen and stocks start tanking 20%, 30%, 40%, when you start seeing properties near you that you couldn't afford before, that now have $20,000 price cuts over the course of a month or 6 weeks, you're in a position to take advantage and kind of profit off of the collapse. And if you need to, there's nothing wrong with getting a job. I know one buddy of mine, he's got a 9-to-5, but he recently got a job at an Amazon warehouse. I'm not a big fan of Amazon as a company. I'm not a big fan of Amazon as a culture. I don't like what they're doing to society overall. I'm not a big fan of Jeff Bezos. But the reality is that Amazon really isn't that bad of a job. I mean, it's a tough job. They don't really care about their employees that much, but I think my buddy's making 20 or 25 bucks an hour. And there's really no interview process. You go in. I was kind of curious because this is a buddy of mine that could never pass a drug test. I was like, dude, how'd you pass a drug test? And he said, it's just a mouth swab. So he's like, I just brushed my teeth, had some gum in my mouth when I went in there and they swabbed my mouth and I wound up passing the test. And this is a kid who stays high all day long. So if he can pass an Amazon drug test, you can pass an Amazon drug test. I'm sure it is going to be a tough job. He actually said his aunt works there and it's not too hard. But they were, there's almost no interview process. If you sign up and you can pass a drug test, you're going to get the job. They're pretty flexible with hours. So I think he's working 7 days a week and he's working 7 to 11. So that's at 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11. So that's 4 hours a day. At 20 bucks an hour, that's an extra 80 bucks a day. At 25 bucks an hour, that's an extra 100 bucks a day. So it's an extra $700 a week. That's an extra $2,800 a month. There's actually more days in most months. So you're probably looking at an extra $3,000 a month before taxes. That's a lot of extra money. You do that for 2 or 3 months and the economy takes 2 or 3 months to unravel, on top of whatever you're able to save from your day job, or even if you're not able to save from your day job and you can just save this Amazon money, that's, let's see, 3, 6, that's $9,000 you can have saved after just 2 or 3 months. So if the economy takes 2 or 3 months to collapse, you got almost $10,000 to throw as a down payment on a house, to throw into the stock market, or, maybe Bitcoin collapses to $9,000 and you can buy yourself a whole Bitcoin just off 3 months of work. Obviously, it's not fun working a full-time job and then working another job from 7 to 11 every night. You're going to beat yourself up. You're not going to have much of a social life. You may even be neglecting your family and friends a little bit. But, sometimes in the short term, you have to make these sacrifices and you have to do these things to put yourself in a position to advance. I'm kind of surprised we knocked this video out in one take. I could kind of keep rambling on about things, but I think we'll probably start to wrap this up. I feel like I've heard some other interesting statistics lately, maybe just some other interesting stories. I saw a story today. 54% of households will not be handing out Halloween candy this year. They're kind of blaming that on inflation, although I think, I'm sure inflation is part of it, but I think part of it is just, and I don't really know why, society has changed so much with the advent of social media and the internet. I feel like a lot of the simple pleasures in life that we enjoyed before, people don't do anymore. Things like, I don't know if anybody ever Christmas caroled, but like Christmas caroling is a thing of the past. I don't see as many people, kids don't play pickup football and basketball games outside, pickup baseball games. And I think in kind of the same way that those things don't happen, I think less people are going to be going out trick-or-treating. I think a lot of these kind of traditional activities are no longer as possible. Now, obviously, the country's divided too. Everyone's scared of their neighbors. Everybody thinks someone's going to put fentanyl in your kid's candy or give your kids weed gummies. So maybe some people for safety reasons aren't out trick-or-treating. But a lot of these traditional activities, a lot of these simple activities, a lot of these smaller things in life that were popular in the past are no longer popular today. So I don't know how much the candy thing is inflation versus is just kind of a change in society and how we live and how we how we celebrate holidays. But I thought that was kind of an interesting story. I guess the Elon Musk deal is going to go down this upcoming Friday, or at least it's supposed to. Nothing's necessarily written in stone. I think it's fairly certain that's going to happen. It's recently come out that he's going to lay off 75% of Twitter employees, which, a lot of people at Twitter are like, oh my gosh, the site won't be able to function anymore. If you're not having to police the culture wars and politics and try to shape people's perception of the world, you probably don't need nearly as many people to moderate the site. Twitter actually has a horrible reputation when there's things on there like revenge porn or images of kids and things like that. Twitter is notorious for being contacted by the government and being told, take this down. They're bringing this to their attention, and Twitter will take months to take these images down. Yet somebody says something like there's only two genders and that'll be taken down in 10 minutes. So when you stop having to kind of police PC culture and cancel culture, I think you probably need a lot less employees to make things run. And earlier in this discussion, we had kind of talked about how perception is important. And, if the media and government and big tech and social media companies can kind of collaborate to change people's perception, that's kind of a powerful thing. And that could send us into a recession. Well, if, Twitter is where a lot of like political and, economy and Twitter's where a lot of discourse goes down, and if Twitter is no longer controlled by people who want to shape the narrative, and Twitter is just more of a reflection of reality and everyday people's experiences, that in and of itself could kind of send things, could kind of send us into the recession that's bound to happen anyways. One thing I think you have to consider is, the way economic cycles work. Normally every 7 to 12 years we go into a recession or the economy pulls back. We were kind of due for that going into the Birkhoff situation. And instead of the pullback that naturally probably should have happened, and especially with everything that was going on in the world, instead of all that happening, we actually saw the S&P 500 rise 33% a year for 2 years. We saw housing prices explode. I heard a good theory, and the theory is that inflation's actually been with us for a number of years. It didn't necessarily hit grocery prices and lumber prices and things like that initially. The inflation that we saw initially was in stocks, was in real estate, was in crypto, and it took 2 years for that inflation to trickle down to groceries and used cars and lumber and everything else. So inflation's actually, in theory, been with us for a lot longer than that. We just saw it in commodities and stocks and investments as opposed to everyday consumer goods. But when you think about, we were due for probably a painful correction as it was, and now we've kind of complicated the situation by not letting things naturally occur. So not only are we going to, in my opinion, have to give up the 2020 to 2022 gains, we're also going to have a normal recession, which will probably be a 20 or 30% pullback on top of that. So imagine if you take everything back to late 2019, early 2020 prices, and then shave another 20, 30, 40% off of that, things could potentially get very, very ugly. Obviously here on YouTube and the internet and blogs and social media, doom porn and doom scrolling is really big and is really popular. We look at channels like Jay Bravo or Stoic Finance, or Graham Stephan. All these channels for a long time have been, everything's collapsing, get out now, and we've been seeing that for the past year or two. So like I said, I feel like a lot of people have kind of become complacent and have kind of stopped worrying that things are going to crash, and it's kind of my thesis that everything's going to start kind of unwinding once midterms are over. So I would love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions about kind of everything we've discussed today. How are you planning to ride this out? Do you agree with my thesis? Do you think we're in for a collapse or a correction or a recession, or do you think everything will be just fine and just peachy? And if you do believe things are going to get bad, what are you doing to prepare yourself right now? How are you saving money? How are you simplifying your lifestyle? How are you trying to solidify your income and your job security and whatever else you're doing? Would love to hear from you guys, so drop a comment down below. If you're not subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button down below and ring the bell. And if you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up. That's all I got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you on the next one.